Cantu,
Here.
Mike Collins, Bernie Clark, Sven England here, Jill Gazzetti,
Here.
Janae Hunter, Krista Kennan,
Here.
Kareem Kerr, Rich Townsend.
Here.
Okay, we've got five, we've got a quorum.
Great.
Terrific. Okay, the minutes. We need to approve the minutes for August 27th,
Yes.
right? And so would anybody like to make a motion that we approve those minutes?
So moved.
Anybody second?
I'll second.
Okay, terrific. Any discussion on the minutes? Any
Nope.
comments?
All in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Terrific, done. Okay, public comments. Members of the public are welcome to provide comments to the Utilities Commission on agenda topics scheduled for review and or vote. Comments are limited to 2 minutes. Clark? You don't want to say that? Okay.
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 Anybody else want to say anything?
I don't see anyone raising their hand. So
Okay, terrific. With that, let's move to number 4 on the agenda, Plan of Conservation and Development. And Hiram Cantu will take us through that. This is a follow-up from last meeting where we had a long discussion on the POCD and what the input would be. Hiram has netted that out and has circulated to all of us his summary.
Right.
Hiram, take it away.
Sure. So what I have here is, I think, a 10-page document that is similar to what was before. So if you remember last time, I provided comments that were on the side and they were bold in terms of what we added here. Based upon the notes and reviewing the video and the comments that we did, I would consolidate them, and they're in italics somewhat. So you can sort of see the evolution of what we've done. But before we get to that, I think, as I as I listened to the comments and I thought about our notes, I thought that identifying these 3 themes that I have in the first slide were important because I think they were within all of our comments throughout. And I'm just going to review them real quick, just for the record, and if anybody has any thoughts. The first one was to be mindful of the term promoting or encouraging or advocating. I think we discussed, and I think we're all in general agreement that, informing, educating, and communicating was very appropriate for many of the policies and actions that were described. And if the term advocate or promote was used, it should be very mindful that that has a different connotation. And so in the subsequent pages, I cited where we thought those were maybe more appropriate to use, but I think it's important to let the POCD commission be aware of that thought. And so I've listed that out. The second point was the term identify. And I thought that was a very important point that was made, raising that, the POCD draft clearly said, yes, let's identify this. But as was discussed by people who have a lot of experience with the town, this effort has been done many, many times over, and it is appropriate to acknowledge that. But as a risk management or just preparedness tool, it's important to reevaluate and confirm. And that would just be appropriate and respectful to the work that's constantly being done by the emergency preparedness team, by the fire department, by all of those individuals. It's just appropriate and respectful and accurate to do so. Or related to that, Krista had mentioned that there was a kind of a building survey done some years ago, pre-COVID, 2017, and she was able to find it. And so I distributed that around just for our own use. And it, again, it's part of the infrastructure review. I think there's others, and the other departments certainly do that, but that is part of understanding what the town has and certain critical infrastructure and buildings as they are. And that's part of the identification. So I thought I was able to skim through that.
I thought that was great.
I thought that was very useful. And so that's an important point to bring up. And then, probably even more interesting was also just the use of the word town. And it's interesting in that, obviously utility services are important. Sometimes they're a luxury, sometimes they're essential. It's a variety of things. And as was mentioned, sometimes there's an expectation or understanding, depending on where you live, what the service could or should be. But we all agreed, obviously, emergency preparedness and services and those emergency things are important everywhere. But that should be maybe distinguished out or clarified or understood. And so, it's just more of, as they go through it, and we've, there's a couple areas where we cited it, but the P O C D text and the commission and the people who are drafting it should just be mindful of that, and that should be something that's discovered. I think there's one section where they talk about residential, commercial, and emergency preparedness. Well, since emergency preparedness is so essential everywhere, that may be different than what needs or what the town wants to provide to residents of commercial. That's a value proposition that the town and the various town committees have to decide, but it is likely very different. And that's something that has to be explored. And so it's not simply, it may not be as simple simply to say, let's do this for, for residents, commercial, and for emergency preparedness. There may be a distinction, and that's worth noting. So those are important. I don't know if we have to go through this in depth, but just to quickly flip through it, again, on the right are the areas that we made changes to. And just as an example, on the policy number 1, where it says promote sustainability, I think it's, I use the term communicate. And I can wordsmith it a little bit more, but the idea is to communicate about sustainability initiatives, because it is about effectiveness, it is about feasibility, and that's an important concept. The number 2, that's from last time, which I think we all agreed to, and actions on C, I think we all agreed to. And again, it's educate, communicate, feasibility, economics, and make available to the public.
That really fits.
Yeah. On the next page, on the policies, I guess it's number 1. It's more evaluate the hardening as opposed to encourage. Again, it's more of just evaluation, figure out what the facts are, and make the decision about whether the value proposition is appropriate for the town. Same thing about on-site generation. It's to review or confirm and make a determination whether it's needed for emergencies. On B, this one I took some liberties, and I welcome anyone's comment about. The idea was in that italics in B about to cite something about kind of helpful communications or to ensure that these were available. I just picked a couple from what we had discussed before. Maybe there are others that should be cited. It was just more of be able to use as an example and to be more specific.
Okay.
So, if you say, I know you're very versed in this. If you think there's a better examples or want to word it differently, just let me know.
No, we'll let it. I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Thank you for the emphasis.
Yeah. I think E is pretty much the same. On page 4, there I've just cited the study. And also emphasized the point about that the city and the emergency preparedness teams reevaluated. So again, to make sure that's acknowledged.
But that town infrastructure study is a different study than the building-wide study that I'm referencing, right? When you say action, a few years ago, a town infrastructure study was conducted, or is it the same?
It was meant to be the same. Is that incorrect?
Oh, here, no, I'm sorry, yes, to support efforts of vegetation, oh, sorry, I'm reading policies instead of actions.
Yeah, so yes.
Right. Yes, it is,
I think it's called, I know it's,
town-wide building.
it was
whatever
called
the
the,
title
yeah, I think the
was.
title was Town Infrastructure Study. I know it was referred to as the Dude Report.
The Dude
by
Report.
By the
The
company.
Dude Report.
Yeah, the
'cause that was
company.
the name of the
company, yeah.
consultant. The
Vendor,
Dudes.
Yeah. Okay.
This was a monumental study. I mean, it was like, it
Yeah,
was
no,
like
it's
600
like a
pages
big-
long with the action plans and everything
Yeah,
else.
I mean, I think we should, whatever the proper title is, like, use it and then put the date of the report on it to really drive
Yeah.
people to it, because that was a huge effort. A committee was formed and we spent a year of our lives doing.
And
But any Murphy
Yeah,
Carroll, and like that,
exactly.
between the two of them.
And the concept was it would continue on and it would
Yes.
become kind of a building block in putting the plan together, the
Right.
budget together each year, that we've got enough money in it to sustain the buildings in an appropriate way.
It was a snapshot, but it was meant to then be a living document.
A living
that would
document.
inform the
To
budget
roll forward.
process. Yeah, going forward, and I don't know exactly how far it's taken.
It's certainly.
I think it's worth noting that as well, Hiram, too.
Yeah, that it was meant to
says, you
be.
know, if you go back and look at this study was very significant in cost, and it was intended to be a building block for the budget.
On page 5, under the policies of, this is really the fire department, whether there was water service for them. This is just emphasizing explore needs and feasibility and communicate the information. Because I think it's the idea is that that is a very important value proposition for the town to be aware of. And where the areas, make sure the town knows, people know about it or have access to that information. And then, decisions can be made upon that. And, it's interesting. I think this goes to the other area that we've spoken about. It's, what we're doing, what the town's doing generally about communicating information.
Right.
A really effective platform for that. That's going to be extremely important, not just for us, but for everything that the town's doing.
Expanding and maintaining water sources outside the hydrant district is really critical. Yeah.
What happens with swimming pools?
Well, there are people who have provided, stores type, fire department connections, to allow people to get,
their
easy
pool.
access to their pool from a hard stand. In the past, it's the state of Connecticut law. I mean, fire department sees that they need the water and you have it. You can go get it. And, we have driven across people's lawns and thrown the hard suction, into the swimming pool and pulled the water out to put out their neighbor's house. And then the person was unhappy about that.
Is there a registration process or anything? If I've got a pool, is it important for the fire department to know I've got a pool, or do they automatically know I've got a pool? So my neighbor's house is on fire. Does that mean, if they know I've got a pool, will they send different equipment?
No, it's always, it'll be the same equipment. It'll be a water seeker pumper.
Okay.
Okay. Strictly, it's, right now it's designated engine 2, which makes sense. Engine 1 goes to the scene, engine 2 goes to get the water. So,
But are you made aware, is the fire department made aware of new pools? I
Pools.
mean, that's a-
There's
is it
two
part
right
of,
next
is
to my
is it
house.
part of the, it's part of the, the online information? I don't know that anymore. I know that it was, there were, certain ones that were gettable. Right. There are some that just,
Too far
aren't,
away or- yeah.
and a fire truck goes right through a fence real fast.
I'll bet.
Okay. On page 6, we had a conversation about acknowledging the self-service and strengths. And here, added language about the evolution of technology and to evaluate the multiple approaches. But I did cite including cell towers, because that obviously is one, but
That's one
evolving
technology.
technologies.
Absolutely.
Because it may not be a cell tower. And so it could be something else, but it all needs to be evaluated. So.
Jill, are you comfortable with that section? I know you have a strong reaction initially to it.
I have a problem with the whole thing that it's focusing very much on evaluating new technologies and things going in the forward, and that you do have that, we have service and strength problem now, but that we're not doing anything about the now, that we're talking about where it's coming down in the future. And I have an issue with how we're addressing things now generally in this committee even. I don't think there's enough in what's written there about that. We need to address that now and we're not here just looking at what's going to happen for people in 10 years.
Over the next, this has to be sort of, because it's over the next decade, but I guess.
Yeah, but
Well,
but it's
that's
a focus on,
that's a good point.
it's, the people have,
A little more fire in the engine here.
Right. People have a
That's a good
problem
point.
now, and we're not looking at
Well,
what we can do
did
for
have
the
other
10 years.
language in there, I thought, or we had discussed in the last meeting about, because I don't have a problem with couching it as multiple approaches, certainly exploring the cell tower option,
That's-
but that we had talked about something like alternate technologies that are feasible in the next 12 months, to kind of put some guardrails around the other exercises, right?
Yeah, I mean,
The
what's-
technology that we know today, like I hear you.
Yeah, it's, the current technology that is available to us now in addition.
Right, so I think that,
Fixing the
I
problem.
think that shows up on, and I think it's more specific on page 8. On page 8, and it's more of a, that page is.
More of an action.
Is more, yeah, that's a goal, and then here the
Okay.
strategy, if you look on page 8 on the bottom, 433 actions A and B, that's where that was addressed. You can see the bold and you can see the italics in terms of what we've,
Right. It's a little softer because we're saying utilize the latest viable technology, like what does that mean? Does that mean, to Joe's point, satellites in 30 years, or does that mean something that's happening in the next 12 months, and it could be.
identify,
Right, it's almost like. in
Yeah,
phases.
do we just do this identify as soon as possible, and identify, I mean, like, again, to make it,
Currently available, identify current improvements and.
Current available solutions.
Yeah, I think,
Current
I think that's a good idea.
and-
Totally
and-
appropriate. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
do you think that
Should be upfront too.
also,
Okay.
there's no reason not to bring similar language up front.
What did we say, currently available?
Currently
solutions?
available solutions.
I like that language.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that better, thank you.
So I just sort of copy that language and insert it into here, and it'll blend in with all this other.
Perfect,
Okay.
thank you.
That's
Do we need to put the same economic
Feasibility.
feasibility around that we put around the other stuff here? Because a lot of,
Available and economically feasible.
and economically feasible, that's one of the things that's blocked this stuff in the past.
Uh-huh.
Is let's put up small cells. Well, that's $50 million or something, and that.
I like that.
I'm just, do you think that, again, because it's important,
Mhm.
and recognizing this is a 10-year study,
Yeah,
in the general theme, to sort of just comment that recognizing it's a 10-year study and the cell tower has been going on, but it's an immediate need, and while it's in the 10 years, should be emphasized to be a sooner rather than later problem.
It's a focus.
It's a focus. It's
it should
a
be a
more of a
focus,
me-
yeah, it
more
should be a
immediate
focus of the infrastructure. It should be a current focus
Yeah.
of the
An
infrastructure.
immediate focus.
Yeah.
Right.
Or an immediate
Yeah,
priority.
no, that's a good point.
Yes, I like.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
So we'll have it in the front, we'll have it as a goal, and then similar at the end.
Okay.
Yep.
Page 7, review update of existing infrastructure. I don't think there's anything too controversial here. And again, just to highlight on page 8, under the policies, originally it said up top, encourage the town to lead renewable energy, which we're sort of, the consolidated comments was to explore the operational economic feasibility of renewable energy initiatives. And that's sort of what we're talking about. And oh, hold on, I'm sorry, I want to make sure I was looking at the old notes, but I think that's about right. Page 8, I want to make sure. Oh, I meant to take out, which I will, the parking.
Yeah.
I will take out the CK reference because it was
Well, I
originally,
like the CK.
it was originally your comment, but we all agree. We all agree that, I mean, as with anything, we don't want these initiatives to crowd out.
Mhm.
To be at the
To crowd
top,
out, to
so
crowd out.
basic,
Yeah, to crowd out, kind of fundamental services. So,
So you'll leave the comment, but take out the secret.
yes, it is a commission comment,
No, I
right?
think it just was lifted.
Yes.
And so now for actions, conduct an updated wireless coverage study by any cell service gaps within the community, which we've done. Identify multiple approaches using the latest viable technology.
So it's identify currently available solutions, from multiple approaches utilizing, I don't know.
The same language
Yeah.
we used earlier.
Yeah.
To improve, and I like when you say, and throughout all.
Yeah.
Touching on that theme.
Yeah.
That's great.
Viable the next year. Around.
Oh, that was what we said. You said next year to
Yeah.
capture
Mhm.
Yeah.
the immediacy of
Page 9, I didn't make any changes. It's more
Mhm.
detail, same themes, and again, a partner as opposed to guide. That's it.
it.
Let me ask one question overall again, is we went through and we have basically put economic requirements around everything, so everything needs to be studied. Are there things where the 10-year, we think the 10-year study the 10-year plan should actually be recommending investing in something? Should we be recommending investing in hardening our electrical system? Should that be something that is actually on the table?
Well, I think that comes after after they formally adopt it, then maybe that's the time when we voice we say, well, this is what this was a study. We've obviously become familiar with it. We think this is a priority, or we think that this is an action plan for this, and this. These others are important too, but this may be more important.
Is that what's going to happen with this? The last POCD had the POCD book, and then it had the action plan.
Implementation.
The implementation plan of how we would deal with it. Is that part of this one? Do you know, Hiram?
I don't know. I know that this,
That didn't work, by the way.
Yeah.
So it worked
I
for
mean,
about
what would
a
the
year or two. And
department
then,
would take the goals and the actions that are on these slides and then put meat on the bones. But is there a committee or for each of these?
I mean,
No.
Is that the issue,
in some,
right?
I'm sorry.
And I was just gonna say, and what you're saying, are there certain things in here that are important that we know are gonna cost money and that we
Right.
should be saying, the town should consider funding or, appropriate funds for
exactly.
this kind of thing, like burying utility bills, maybe sell, the things that are important that you're not gonna do without money.
Right.
I mean, there's things that, how much money and what's feasible is a decision to make, but you're not gonna do anything without some kind of money.
Right.
And things that there are no ownership of.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
You know,
Perhaps,
So-
is that
Maybe it's an overall theme like you have on the first slide and say, secure. We recommend that each group secure the appropriate funds to carry out the actions described here. And make it very broad, but
Or maybe we say that ownership and funding should be expressly, I don't know, addressed for each of these, whatever each of these goals,
Mhm.
because some of them aren't owned, there might be a goal, but nobody
Right.
owns it. And if nobody owns it, there's not gonna be funds for it,
I think,
there's not gonna be, so maybe
Right.
we just say, maybe.
I think if we put that in there, they're gonna, I think they're gonna wrap this up pretty quickly. I don't know if
They
they'll be
are.
able,
Yeah.
but it does signal like that's obviously an important goal.
Right.
It's just, many of these things is just, it's sort of acknowledging this is important. How it gets into the ultimate draft, who knows? That
And
is
a
up to
lot of
them.
this stuff is in the basic budget and
Right.
in the capital plan going forward. I mean, there is a recognition of it.
Right.
But I'm just wondering whether there should be more of a recognition on some parts than others.
I certainly think that after it's adopted or finalized and it's republished in its final form, then, the other departments are supposed to kind of take that, but then the commission can evaluate it, and direct,
Yeah, I
be
feel-
much more
I
specific.
feel like going forward, we should do that from a utility standpoint.
Yes.
We should say, you know what, we think the town ought to invest some money in burying wires in these areas. Right, and we think this ought to be a focus going forward in some of the things. It doesn't have to say it in here, but I would carry
Right.
it forward.
We
that
can-
should help do that evaluation.
Right.
Yeah, and maybe, and that's what I was saying, some of these that like burying the wires, which we're not gonna do without money, and
Right.
we really think, and step one really is finding some money to do it, so
Right.
maybe that does go in as a goal of yours, securing funds to begin this process, because if you don't start getting money at some point, it never gets done.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, I don't have any suggestions on what to do, except I think this, personally, I think this is you've done a terrific job on pulling this together and putting some meaningful input in.
So what I will do is turn this around tomorrow. And I guess from there, that's what we'll submit.
Yeah.
We'll just submit.
So we probably ought to vote on this and say, right, we ought to, so Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to move forward and submit this draft as discussed this evening to the first selectman and the board of selectmen, right? Is that
I mean, I think probably I was gonna send it to, yeah, to the city planner.
to the?
City
Yeah.
planner, yes.
Okay,
But I would copy the selectmen and I would copy the selectmen as well as the town council.
Mhm.
Because we work for those two
Okay.
and us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Now do,
so I'm making the motion
Okay.
that we submit this draft as discussed with these little revisions this evening to the town planner, the board of selectmen, the town council, and obviously within our group.
am I allowed to second? Can I second? Okay, I'll second.
Rich is seconding and discussion.
Any more discussion?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think it's really.
Hiram, thank you very much
Yeah.
for taking the lead on this. I think this has turned out
It's good that
turned out
everyone's
very well. Yep, I think so. I think it is too.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is UCLA.
Just 1 second.
Okay.
I did get a text, just to remind you that if the fire department does come through your backyard to get your pool water, that the town will replace your fence, fix your lawn, and replace the water.
Of course they will. Is it catered?
No babysitting. Well done.
Okay, so let's move on to number 5, UCLA cell coverage study update. Do you want to lead off? I don't think we're going to have Hiram. So we'll kind of sub for him as well.
What I'd like to share with the commissioners is that I attended a communication meeting that the first selectman has with the multiple departments in town hall to discuss all that's going on with the cell study. Last month in the August newsletter, the
Right.
first selectman's August newsletter, they shared the write-up that Janae and Rich worked on, announcing that we completed the study and links to where it can be found on the website. So as a next step, I had recommended to them that we share, some interesting visuals, let's
Right.
say. And part of that initially was, the initial thought was to pull 4 slides from the presentation with the individual carriers, because they're kind of difficult to read right now on that one slide. And that we would share that, and we just have to figure out, what are the best maps, because there's so many versions of, can you maintain a call, can you download data? So whichever 4 maps we land on, I think it is important to have some visual. 'Cause
I think so
it
too.
just engages people in a
Mhm.
meaningful way. We will figure out the 4 maps and then have very detailed descriptions of exactly what that represents. And then the second piece that I shared with them was UCLA had sent through a PDF with just like an instructions on how to download the app and start doing the test at home, which is cool. So we want to communicate with residents that that is something that they can now participate in as well. So there are 2 YouTube videos UCLA sent us, because it's different if it's an Apple phone or an Android. And then also that 1-page PDF page. So Greg Riley, I don't know if people remember him, but he was the editor of the New Canaan Advertiser, and he was in the room
For
as
years.
well.
Yeah.
And is a grant writer, and he is helping to kind of put together a little write-up that we can include in the next newsletter. So we need to get those materials to them by the end of September to be in the October newsletter. And I think we can just continue to roll out information. The next phase, which is what we will have Hiram share with us next time he's with us, is this next phase of him analyzing the data and putting like a topography layer on it. Remember, like, how high is the signal or low, because that really matters. Right now, we kind of have a 2D view and we want to have a 3D view. But that's part of that new budget ask that we were going to do. So when that evolves, if that evolves, we can always share that later. But I think it's great that we just continued. We want to get this in front of everyone, and not everyone is going to click on the link and read the 60-page report. So I think the more kind of sound bites, if
They'll
we
read
will.
3 pages of it.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
that'll do them in.
Yeah, so the more, kind of sound bites that we can provide people are great. And it's not just the newsletter, it would be given out to, the local press, if you will, like the New Canaanite, the Sentinel, the Advertiser,
They also like distribute it through like the Chamber of Commerce. Sometimes we're trying to actually maybe work with the library too, just every touch point that is feasible to get that information in front of them. So it was a great meeting. And I, will continue with some follow-up emails, but I know you had spoken with Alex at Ookla to
I did.
talk about the maps.
Right. And the current thing that is on our website, on our page in the town website is the current presentation they want us to have up there. Right. And it has on the bottom, the problem here was it said confidential and secret or whatever. And so we said, you can't do that because it's all public. So that's stupid. And so they put proprietary in it. And proprietary is kind of stupid too, because who knows what proprietary means. In going back and forth with them, we've agreed that we will put a statement up front that says, you can't copy this or use it without the express consent of Ookla and ourselves. Right?
It's like our stuff comes out as, government purpose rights.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's right. And so we will replace the first page or whatever again with that. And so I started going through it and deciding what we were going to put up. And there's a lot of good stuff there. And I really wanted to spend more time figuring out how to do this so it was meaningful to people. And there were some things that were not maps that were, I thought some of the most meaningful things in the presentation were the ones where there were two tables, one of which was how often did you get a phone call that actually went through versus not, and why it failed, and et cetera. And the other one was why the data stuff failed. And I think it's important to get those two tables up because that is by vendor.
Okay.
So you can really see, and you can see Verizon fails 15% of the times they make your calls, period. And nobody else is over about 5, if I remember the numbers properly. So we'll get that put up. And so I think that's coming along. The other thing that was confusing, and you didn't bring it up here, but it came up in your meeting because it came up with me and Deanna this morning, which was what's Karim really doing? Right. And I circulated a one pager to all you folks before the last meeting that said, this is what I think we should have Karim do. Karim in turn went through that and wrote up a 10-page spec on what he was planning to do, which basically mirrored that in a lot more detail and technical jargon. And so I go back and look at those. I sent those to Deanna today to try and straighten out. Look, Deanna, Karim thinks he's doing everything that we've just told you we were going to do, and it is covered in the $4,000, 2 months worth of a development program. And so if you can get us the $4,000, this is what we're telling you we're going to be able to do.
What are we gonna do with what he gives us once we have?
Okay, well, here's what will be different than what we just described. The maps that we just described are points on the roads. Right. So if your house is 300 feet off the road, that point may be valid or not valid. Right. I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's the typical maps we see where it's red and green, that is all generated by everybody off those same points because the points can only come off the roads. Right. And so it's done off the points on the roads, and it is done with interpolation between all of the points. So you get 5 points and you interpolate between them, and you use topography and primarily to figure out the difference on how the signal will travel. He will do that with the topographical map and lay that on top of the data. We
So
got the
it accounts
GPS data.
For valleys and.
Exactly.
Bridges
And he will have to come up with a model that says, here's how you do it. If it moves up 2 feet, you move the point this way, 2/10 of the way to the closer point.
Your data may vary.
And
It's an interpretation,
right.
interpolation.
So he doesn't have, I was
Interpolation.
just gonna say, he doesn't program for that, he's just making.
To me, it's like model.
It's
right?
modeling.
Is that the right?
It's modeling.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering where he gets his model of what a ridge does to a point and what a.
I think he's well, at least what he's communicated to us is he understands how that works. I'm sure there are common models on how everybody does on what it means.
But
So
in
height-
addition to the
Height of
topography.
the antenna and where you are.
Right.
Can you line of sight it?
Right, so in addition to the topography in general, he also was going to be able to kind of forecast the two projects that are in the wings, if you will, the two towers right now, right? The one on Onus Ridge by the reservoir.
Right,
And by the armory.
by the armory.
By
There's
the
a new
armory,
tower
so
going
he
up by the
can-
armory.
If, let's say the proposal right now is to put in a 100-foot tower, he can project, what if we made it 120? You know, would your.
And
what
put
would
in
your
2 more
coverage
antennas.
level- Or what if you put 2 antennas instead of 5? So I think it's promising. So it's like, that's the next step. And then I think the third step is, well, what if we want to model other towers?
New towers.
You know, anywhere.
Mhm.
That this, he'd have the ability to analyze that for us, is what he said.
And so there's really 2 things. One is, what is the coverage we think we've got so people can interpret it, effectively look at their address and see what the coverage is and see what it is 300 feet from there. You know, I mean, really down to pretty substantial. And then be able to model what we think would work. And this is exactly what the cell phone companies do when they determine on where they're going to spend their money, right? Where am I going to get the most revenue from, and how do I get the most signal there? And so I think what we're doing is the right thing. I think the $4,000, I'm very hopeful that can cover everything we're talking about. And that Karim said it could, so that's what we're doing. And I got a call from Deanna this afternoon that said, we've got the 4,000, go to work. So just make sure and spend it properly. So we got to go back to Tiger and make sure we get invoices and, you know, all of that stuff because it'll be one person, right? It's going to be one program.
With Corinne.
Yeah.
Corinne and one programmer. And so we have to be clear about what we're modeling and what the deliverables are, because with
Right.
the technology and the communication meeting, it came up that Tiger has this amazing GIS, you know, thing, right, that exists because of the town of New Canaan. And I thought, oh, good, we could just take the maps and that and put it together, and that's not the case. So we have to be clear, we have to have Corinne explain to us exactly what software he has. And
Right.
does he have the ability to create that deliverable? If not, we may want to work with a company called Teague and Bond is who New Canaan uses. And Tiger said that we could get in touch with them to do this GIS overlay, if you will, on the existing Ookla maps or whatever maps Karim comes
Right.
up with. But that's a separate exercise and certainly a separate cost.
Okay. And so in dealing with Deanna, and this is fair from her, I mean, her message was, please tell me, give me a budget for this year so you can actually have money instead of spend everybody else's as you've done so far. And so we need to come
Sounds
up,
like work.
we need to come up with some kind of number, and I'd appreciate input from anybody on the things they think we need to do and what that would cost going forward. I will get a hold of Karim and say, look, you got the money. Let's get going and try and get him to connect with Tiger to get things moving on this.
So I've one question, and this can be pretty high level, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding the path that we're on. So this work goes on, modeling, making sure it maps, and maybe even the hypotheticals. If these 2 projects go on, this is what it could be.
Right.
Then what?
Then what?
Then
And
what?
people have to start making some decisions.
Right. And so
Right.
how do we take the data, a functional map, some scenarios that can be evaluated that are better than what we have now, because we have nothing. Where do we go from there to the town making a decision, to us making a recommendation, any verification by someone who may actually end up doing it? Not to put anyone on the spot, I'm just sort of curious how that plays into and what the timeframe is.
That's a great question. And I think the answer in my mind is we need to figure out how to get an inventory of the technology that's available, what it costs and what it'll actually do, and somebody that understands it. Now, whether we got to pay somebody, which we probably do to do that, we need a technology plan. And we need a technology plan that has a reasonable breadth of the technology available. In addition to that, I think the immediate things we can do is I think we can get a hold of, here's the thing that occurs to me, is the basic zoning requirements we put in place and people have followed is 110-foot poles. A 110-foot pole is a very minimum in our trees. So we're not getting a lot of coverage out of the poles we're putting up. And so the way we're operating today is we're gonna put a lot of poles up if we really want a lot of coverage. Or we put bigger poles, we put taller poles up. They don't necessarily have to be bigger, they just gotta be taller. And being short is a problem for two reasons, is on a 110-foot pole, which is what I believe the country club has, you can fit two antennas and the associated equipment down on the ground for it. Well, you can't even get the four companies on it, right? And so by definition, we as citizens will have to be choosing between two, we'll be able to have a choice of one or two to be around our house. And if we spend more time someplace that's not at our house, we're going to be choosing another one as well. And so we put ourselves, I think, in a difficult position with the kind of poles we have. So my intent is for us to go back to the owners of the current 110-foot poles. And the thing that was interesting to me was the Armory pole, because there is an approved pole that Verizon's got that they're going to start working on. I don't believe they started working on it yet, but they had authority to start building it February 2nd. And go back to them and just say, so how do we get more coverage out of this? They want it there because they don't have enough coverage across the town and the school. And Verizon doesn't care about coverage across all of our town. They care about the places that they're short on power for their current clients. And they think that's where these antennas are going to point. They're going to point at the high school because that's where all of the action is every day. And they want to get a bigger piece of that. And my question, and maybe I get shut down in 2 minutes, but my question is, well, why don't we, you're planning on putting 2 antennas in there, there's room for 5. Why don't we get 2 more? Why don't we get T-Mobile in there? And why don't we, right? And that's what they're supposed to be. That's what the siting council is supposed to be motivating, is getting everybody as much on the tower as possible. And I mean, maybe people won't like that solution, but I think it would be nice to at least see whether we can get that solution offered, because we got a 110-foot tall pole at the country club, at St. Luke's, the new one that's going to go in up on Ponus Ridge, right? And these poles just aren't going to have the oomph that we're hoping they're going to have, right? And so that's just my first thought on what could we do that would be quick. Right? And how long does it take to build a pole? I don't know, 6 months or whatever. I mean, to get it approved probably takes more than that. But if there's one standing there and the owner wants to do it, I'm relatively sure the siting council will move right along on it. So that's my first thought.
I mean, I think it is logical to start with the existing infrastructure, right? It's there. We don't have to argue about it. There are certain poles sprinkled around town. So we want to maximize their efficiency and coverage for the citizens. And hopefully this modeling will be able to make that more
Right.
tangible.
That's the point of the
concrete
model.
For citizens. And then the next layer would be, well, does town have an appetite for additional ones? That'll be a different discussion.
Right. And by the way, what I'm talking about will be totally counter to what the current zoning specs are, right? Because the current zoning specs are 110.
Right, but
But that's what the POZ ordinances, is that where you find this?
Yeah,
So it would have to.
the zoning rules, yeah.
I would suggest that over the next couple of months, as this kind of model and all sorts of formulate, maybe we create sort of again, high level sort of, these are the steps that we're going at, just so that we make sure that we're staying on course and that we're sort of even transparent with the town on, like, this is what we're doing and this is where we're headed. Again, just because it's an immediate need and
Yeah.
it's a way to even to hold ourselves accountable to, these are the steps, this is where we're at. And it may be
great-
helpful to us
that's a
just to
great
know if there's things we need to start ahead of time, that something else is coming. And I'm a little bit, maybe not in the details, but maybe that's something for us to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, it could just be simply number one, doing a 10-step plan with one sentence
I think
each. It might be as simple as
that's a
that,
great idea.
that we could expand upon. But maybe if we all agreed upon it, also maybe just be
Yeah.
good that we're all on the same page. I wouldn't want to give anyone more work. I don't think I'm not sure I'm aware of all the steps that are involved, but I just think it's something really helpful.
There is a formula to be be honest, I think, right? It'll get very interesting once we get past that first.
Yeah, and then maybe
hurdle, right?
it evolves, because we say like,
And
well, now we're gonna
be-
change.
We're at that first hurdle.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is the time that we got to start going, I think. Yeah, one of the things we talked about before, and I was hopeful perhaps it would give us some guidance on what to do, is doing some surveys of the citizens, because we have this crazy thing. Everybody thinks it's lousy. Nobody wants a tower. The tower is the solution of the day, right? I mean, like it or not, it's the solution of the day. You drive away from here, and we drove to Gettysburg a few weeks ago, and every 3 miles you go by a 185-foot tower with every antenna in the world hanging off it. And you know what? The phones just light up. And you know, you drive back into the urban area here, the phones just die, you know?
Yeah, and
so-
I think surveys would be good too, because I also think that you get a lot more voice out of people who are opposed to them than you do out of the number of people,
I have no
that care.
problem with the survey. I think it's always great to reach out to the citizens, but I just feel like we need to have very specific.
Specific
things that we're
questions, yeah.
asking them,
Yeah, I
and
agree.
right now, I don't know that we have enough to discuss with
Yeah,
them,
oh,
right? mean,
I don't think
unless
now
we
is the
feel
time, yeah, I
differently, do
agree,
you know what
I
mean?
agree,
Like,
I just,
Maybe as the answer
Empathy.
becomes more clear.
Yeah.
As a technological answer relative to the
Mhm.
pro forma infrastructure,
Right.
more the lower hanging fruit is clear, and we realize, okay, that'll do that, but there's still a gaping hole blank. Maybe that's the question that we start to ask, because that's where I won't say challenge, but I think that's where the work, and it's not the obvious answer. And that's where we maybe get more,
Well,
more specific
Why
support.
doesn't everybody put their thinking cap on between now and our next meeting, which I don't know when it is, but it's probably the third,
Probably a month from now.
probably a month from now. Probably a month from now. And let's come back and spend a half hour or something discussing exactly this. So how do we get traction on the technology, which I think is a big piece of it. And how do we get traction on what do the people really want us to do? I mean, I just think it's almost comical, right? I just want more cell coverage. No, I don't want to see a tower. I don't want to live within
You have to
1,000
come up
feet
with
of
the
a
things
tower.
that can say, if he can really do this and we can say, this is what
Yeah.
you're gonna get, we put a tower here, we need our towers to be 150 feet and it's going to, and then you
Right.
can tell people what it'll actually
Right.
do.
This area is not going to be served by these new infrastructures. If you want this,
Right,
you've got
right.
two options. It's either this 150 tower, or it's a couple of this, or not. There's like,
Right.
other than
And
that, nothing
that's
will,
it for the next
nothing
5
will
years,
change.
right?
Nothing will
Yeah.
change. How do you feel about that?
Right, exactly. But let's see if we can organize something just so everybody thinks. So we have a meaningful discussion like we've had with Hiram's
Mhm.
Hiram's review here. Okay? Okay. Anything else we ought to talk about? So quite frankly, we've got the money. It's time for us to do work. So I think that's great news.
Okay.
I think that's great news. Next on the agenda was commissioner reports. And I don't know who has a commissioner. I have a report. I
Let's
don't
do
know
it.
whether anybody else does. And my report, Fred, do you want to join us up here at the table? I brought a guest.
So we please press it.
And this is Fred Bird. He happens to be my next door neighbor.
All right, just introduce yourself, so we're addressing you.
I'm Fred Bird. I'm 48 White Oak Shade. I'm Rich's neighbor for 27 years now.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's
And
right.
been fun. I mean, when we moved in, and now there was another set of neighbors down below us, and we all had kids, and now everybody grew up, and it's been 20 years, and now after 20 years, we have the voices of little kids in the neighborhood again. That's how long we've been neighbors.
That's how long the second generation has come around.
Right.
Well, the
right.
reason I invited Fred was Fred has a unique technology in his basement that I think is worth discussing. It's a small scale cogeneration electrical system. And it's built by a company named Axiom Energy. And Fred brought it to my attention. He said, I think this would be interesting for people in the town to know it exists. And Fred is like one of the grandfathers of this thing. How long you had it? 15 years?
15 years.
He was number 6 in the nation to put one in. And the interesting thing about it, quite frankly, is it just saves money on electricity.
So,
So
so
Fred,
to that
you
point,
wanna just
um,
explain what it is and how it
well,
works?
just, so I'm a particle physicist by training. Stanford educated, Rich and I have that in common. And I was in the phys biz for a long time, but then when Clinton killed the super collider, I came to Wall Street, one of the rocket science guys. And so I've been here ever since. Now, that doesn't mean you give up. You can take the boy out of physics, but not the physics out of the boy. So 15 years ago, for different reasons, we had to do some things to the house, and it was partly motivated by this new emergent cogen technology. And so I looked at geothermal, solar, all these things. And I needed something that would heat the house all year round. And, the choice, solar is great in the summertime, but in the wintertime when the sun goes low and, it doesn't work quite as well. And this cogen facility, really fit the bill. Now, this is an internal combustion engine funded and designed by the government in the early 2000s. It's not exactly clear to me what they did this for, but the nice thing about this particular widget is that it's extremely efficient. It burns propane or natural gas at about 90%. Most propane natural gas facilities will burn at about 35. Not only that, it grabs all the waste heat that's generated in the process and reburns it. So in fact, there's next to zero emissions from these things. There are no particulates, no nasty hydrocarbons. It's burnt. And it's all comes back to you. So in fact, for each therm of propane that you burn, you save about 35% of it because it's using it much more efficiently. At the same time, it generates electricity off the back of it. And my little unit here, what it looks like sitting in my basement. There's that one, and this slide over. So that's the unit. It's called EcoPower. And originally this was a company in East Troy, Wisconsin called Marathon Engine Systems. They got the rights to use this thing. And for my needs, it burns very efficiently. And when it's running in the early days, when it ran a lot, I didn't pay any electrical bills in the wintertime. Because when you install this thing, you set it up and you feed back to the grid whatever you don't use. So I generate whatever electricity generates, I use, whatever I don't use goes back to the grid. And I just get the same propane bill that I would normally get, but I use less propane for given a non-engine like this, just burning propane. So it's you win in lots of ways. The problem with this thing is that, in theory, is that in the summertime, whenever you don't have a call for heat, there's nothing for it to do. So if you've got a pool like I do in the summertime, you just need to heat the pool. And so it gives you something to do in the summertime. Otherwise, you don't really need to heat the house that much. But now these, over time, and again, I was an early adopter. There were several of these in Fairfield County. Other guys had done this thing. And that company at that time was also new. And they came into some company problems. And so I'm just interested in this thing. And so I've learned how to really take care of it myself. And so I do most of my maintenance and things on it myself. The interesting thing about this is it's not just another furnace. There's a sophisticated electronic piece that has to be used in addition to the engine itself to get the feedback, to get this heat saved, right? So there's some electronics, and they're like, that company at the time, their electronics piece really wasn't up to snuff. And now they've fixed that. And I think really on the back of what I've been their guinea pig for the longest time, but I like it. So now we've got it to a place where it's really good. And now in the last 5 years, they've changed their name to Axiom Energy. They got rid of the other old guys and brought in some new guys, young, good engineers. And these guys are very talented. We fixed the electronic problems, and now this thing purrs. So I remember now thinking about more. There was a gentleman, first name Dan, who did something with New Canaan Utilities, who came when the Sachs project was being done maybe 7 or 8 years ago, right? You're going to rebuild Sachs, and the whole, how do we heat this place came up again. So I just raised my hand, and he came over and looked. And I think in the end, there is a cogen facility here somewhere in town. I don't know if it's at Sachs or.
I think it's at Saks, isn't it?
That was,
That was where they were gonna put it.
that was going on in high school, but that's okay.
I-
We were all there for the meeting, but we don't
Yeah.
remember.
Exactly.
And so they didn't go with this, but this is the micro CHP. CHP is combined heat and power,
Mhm.
right? So this is really built for a home. Or there's another installation who is the primary maintenance for this area up in Danbury under Mitchell Propane.
Oh, Mitchell, okay.
Right. So they have a few of these units running their car wash, and I use their maintenance guys for just normal 4,000 hour utility service. Right, comes out, changes the oil effectively, things like that. So this thing is really great. If you have a project that needs at least some 15 therms of heat all the time for any reason, whether it's heating a pool, heating anything. If you have, what's another good example? Maybe a multifamily home, or where, as opposed to distinct townhomes like an Avalon or something where everybody has their own hookup and they're paying their own bills. We're in a situation where everybody's using a central water facility that gets used a lot. This works terrifically. Or in a big house, and particularly a big house with a pool.
How
so
many
you can
therms do
this
you
thing.
use? How many therms do you use?
I don't know. I just get my bill. I just get my kilowatt hours. Right. And that, your bills are cyclical, and it depends on the price of propane and all that. So on average, I don't have a number for you. But certainly when things are running great like they are now, it's much better, much better than when it's not running. And it hasn't been running when the electronics wasn't working, because I kept blowing, my unit just kept blowing up the electronics inside. And so they finally hired some good electronics people, and now those problems have gone away. So
Would you be able to use
purse.
this for a generator too?
Right, so now I went back, Rich, after talking to you earlier tonight, and I misrepresented a couple of things. There are a couple of installations now in California. If this thing gets installed, they can now install, it wasn't available when I started this 15 years ago. But now they have either a battery or off an external generator that if the grid goes down, they can power this thing off of that. So it will still run and still keep heating things.
And it could replace, the point is, can it replace buying a generator? Right, that's the question I think you're saying. It
It's
looks
got a
like,
battery, yes, they can build that in now. And again, there are a couple of these in California. This part is relatively new, and thanks to this new set of people who fixed the electronics, it all comes down to electronics issues. The engine itself is just a marvel. I mean, mine's been running, it has over 40,000 hours on it, and it acts like it's day one.
the first,
It just runs.
Fred came and talked to me about this and said, you know, I know you're on the Utilities Commission. Maybe you guys would be interested in this. And as we talked about it and I thought about it, and that was why I brought it in. I talked to the CEO for about 2 hours last Friday. And he took me through what Fred just did, but he used some examples that are also appropriate. Our town is really appropriate for this. A lot of people have pools. A lot of people in the 4-acre areas that have generators have pools. And if this thing could replace the generator and cut your electric bill by 35% or something, this would really be.
Oh, the electric bill goes away.
Yeah, the electric bill goes away, but
Certainly in the winter.
cut your oil bill by 35%.
Yeah, the
Well,
heating and propane would, I don't know, 35, I don't know, but,
Well, I'm gonna.
25 is great.
Yeah, I'll come back to it. I mean, it is clearly economic.
It is.
It is clearly ecological. I mean, a plant, a big electrical plant that produces all the juice that we all use is 60 to 70% efficient. And this is, and I don't even know that
Further,
includes
they,
the
now
line losses.
They've got this new financing business in Boston that called Renew. And you can look this up yourself, that is willing to provide funding for the installation and even maintenance and service, provided that you split your savings with them over the course of its lifetime. So now there's almost no capital outlay initially if you do things properly.
If you want to,
I didn't have
want to
that.
give up
Well,
some.
I'm just gonna ask you, what did you pay for your unit 15 years ago and what will the unit typically run today?
Well, the unit itself is like 35 grand then. I don't really know what the price is now, but it ain't 35 grand, right? And there's some ancillary stuff. There was the other picture here. I don't know if you looked at, but I have a huge 250 gallon hot water tank that it needs because it wants to build up a store of hot water. All it does is to make sure that there's hot water in that tank. That's all the whole function of this unit is to make sure there's hot water in that tank all the time. So as you use it for whatever purposes. So I have the heating, it's all indirect, right? Beautiful custom plumbing done by a firm in Fairfield. That's all indirect, heats my house, 3 zones, plus my pool. Pool pipes in to the pool, runs through the indirect heat exchanger and heats that up. And a couple of other items that I do, it takes care of. This thing just wants to make sure there's hot water. I don't know what the cost is now of this engine.
And then if you don't have a pool though, are there other ways that it can burn off the excess energy, or that's just?
Take a lot of showers.
If you read- if you read-
needs,
Hot water.
yeah, it makes hot water. That's what it does.
When you read the flyer, and it says like, this is primarily for people who need a lot of hot water.
That's right.
Okay. And, the electricity is funsies.
Yeah, it's a byproduct.
And,
But it's a lot of electricity.
so it's pumping, so the electricity is on somewhere, depending upon what number you're reading, somewhere between 1.2 and, 2.2, possibly 4.4 kW max.
It's 4K. I can watch it when I turn it.
Getting
It runs
4K
right
out
up to
of
4K.
Okay, so you get 4 kW out of it, but the heat output, is like, tremendous number of watts. It's over 10,000 watts.
And no emissions.
Yeah. But if you don't need the heat, if you don't have some place to go with all that water, this may not be your best solution.
Right.
But
It's
if
something
you
like
do-
the Y.
Yeah.
I mean, the Y would be
The Y would be a
a
perfect.
spectacular
Yes.
When
item for it.
when talking to the CEO last Friday, he took me exactly through what Fred did. He sent me all the installation manuals, et cetera. So, and he's excited about having an opportunity to talk to us because not only, I think we've got a residential opportunity for him.
Municipal.
And a municipal one, because the thing that he was interested in really was apartment buildings, like we just built over on 123, where it's got 50 apartments in each of those buildings, and I'm sure they've got common heat and common hot water. And what he said is, he said, look, when I got in here and started taking this over, we went to the apartment guys and we tried to get the apartment guys to buy it. And he said, the apartment guy said, you know, if this was really so good, you'd be $1 billion company. So I'm just not so sure. And so he said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll put it in for 6 months.
Right.
And I'll come in and take it out if you don't like it, and I'll put back in what you got. And I'll give you that choice. And so he put it in. 6 months later, he called the guy and said, well, am I coming out? And he said, I want every one you can build. I want every one you can build. And the numbers.
And if you start early enough, I think in these apartment conversations, that maybe they're gonna do it separately,
Right.
but he can change the conversation.
Yeah, and the numbers he gave me on the phone, and I don't know whether they're right or not, but it was 100 apartment units. So that would be like the View, quite frankly, if the View had common stuff, and I don't know whether they do or not. But he said the guy came back and he said, look, I spent 35% less on propane, and I spent nothing on electricity for the whole place. And so I just thought this was interesting as a utility commission. Maybe we should look at this. I mean, you know, we talk about Eversource and burying wires and stuff like that. I thought maybe this is something we should be communicating to our citizens. This is an alternative to solar. I've got solar in my house. We don't save that much money in our house. We put in kind of the maximum amount of solar you could put in, and we've had it for about seven years. And we pay nothing for electricity for about 7 months a year. And then we pay probably half for the other 5 months. But our bill for the last several months has been $9.42 for electricity. So, and I'm not trying to sell this to anybody, but
Either, I'm just a customer.
yeah, what I wanted to get from you guys is, does it seem like I should deal with this guy a little bit and get him to do a Zoom with us, you know, and see whether we ought to actually give him an entree to the town or not. That's what he would like. And he really wants me to meet with the financier from Boston. He wants a meeting next week, which I'm glad to do. And I will tell you, this is exactly how solar got put into New Canaan, because we got a consultant that did it, and we got a financier that took, I don't know what it was, 25% of the savings or whatever, and put it on the high school, put it on the junior high school, put it on the grade schools, put it on this building. And so this is the exact model, and this other financing company would be doing exactly the same. Cool. Okay.
It'd be interesting to see how it would fit together.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, like I said on the phone, you know, chatting with you, that, you know, this is something that we should, you know, at least go forward, you know, have a public forum, you know, and try and get the information out there for people, you know, who can use this. I mean, it's not gonna be mine, but, you know, it may be it's gonna be somebody else's.
Yeah, I don't have a
other than
pool, it
Fred.
won't work for
There are
me.
lots of pools.
But there are a lot of pools. My two neighbors just put them in, so.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Two neighbors just
We've
put
been
'em in.
living through it all summer.
Exactly. I think about that, too. Man, I could have saved a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a 10,000 square foot house too.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, that's my report. Okay.
Thanks, Fred.
Thanks very much for coming over.
Good luck with your towers.
Anybody else have anything they want to bring up before we close the meeting? Okay, so I think I'll send a note out tomorrow to everybody else as well, that we're gonna have a session next time. Now, how do we go forward, and what is everyone's thoughts on the to-do list?
Yeah.
So we can put our per chart together and says, here's,
An action plan.
Yeah.
right, exactly, it's time, it's
It
time we
is
do it.
time, Jill, it's time.
It's time.
I agree.
Okay.
Somebody want to make a
I will
motion?
make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And all those
All in favor? Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Terrific.